Regional integration for Africa's economic prosperity is a theme of the 2019 annual meetings of the African Development Bank, with Africa set to create the biggest market in the world with the takeoff of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Delegates will brainstorm on how to fully leverage this historic agreement to fully integrate the continent. Welcome to the special highlights of this event. I'm Esther Awuni. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, when fully implemented, will be the largest free trade area in the world since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1994. It is against this backdrop that the African Development Bank themed its 2019 annual meetings, Regional Integration for Africa's Economic Prosperity.
Regional integration is crucial for Africa's accelerated development. We must connect landlocked countries to ports. We must allow free movement of people. Investors must be able to invest beyond the borders of countries. And Africa must trade more with itself. Apart and divided, Africa is weakened. Together and united, Africa will be unstoppable. We're delighted that you've all joined us here today in this beautiful country of Equatorial Guinea, a country you will find to be exemplary in terms of infrastructure.
Equatorial Guinea is the first Central African country to host the annual meetings. The country's president, Teodoro Obiang Mbasogo, says Equatorial Guinea is open for business and welcomed all the delegates to this year's meetings.
On behalf of the people and government of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, I am pleased to welcome to this opening ceremony to all delegations of friendly and brotherly and sister countries which are participating in this 54th annual meeting of the African Development Bank, whose presence we value and appreciate as an act of cooperation and solidarity in pursuit of the development of our continent. We wish to convey to you the fraternal greetings of the people of Equatorial Guinea, and we wish as well for you to enjoy our traditional hospitality.
One of the reasons why we're here is because this particular region it's one where we believe that the potential is immense. But the level of integration doesn't allow this region to fully benefit from that potential. Potential in natural resources, whether it's forestry resources, whether it's water resources, whether it's mines, whether it's minerals, metals, is huge. But there needs to be a lot of regional integration for them to be able to benefit and to also to industrialize.
At a high-level presidential dialogue, some African leaders shared their views on the importance of regional integration.
As for us in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we fully subscribe to the ideal of regional integration in Africa because we are convinced that it is key to the development of our continent.
African countries have to promote South-South cooperation. We speak of South-South cooperation, but it is not a reality yet. When we say South-South, that means that we have to have economic and trade relations with other African countries, because we cannot continue forever to depending on the major countries. And that is why we need integration in Africa, and a free trade zone, I think, is something extremely positive that can help us to change the present situation in Africa.
The African Development Bank did not have to wait for African Continental Free Trade Area to invest in infrastructure. That's what we do every single day. Over the last 10 years, we've invested more than $15 billion in infrastructure. You're looking at ports, you're looking at rail, you're looking at ICT infrastructure to make sure that the backbones that are necessary for regional integration is actually in place.
Let's start with the free movement of people. You highlighted that 25% of African countries allow you to enter with no visa, 24% allow you to enter with visa on arrival. But I want us to focus on the 51% where visa is still needed for Africans to move freely into that country. How do we change the status quo? We've made great strides, but there's a 51% target that we need to look at now.
Investment is like water. It goes to where there's the least resistance. If you take a look at the countries that have actually made the most in terms of visa openness index, they happen to be the ones also that have the highest level in terms of investment. The 51% have to learn from the fact that the others that are actually opening up their borders happen to be, and also giving people visas, are the ones that are able to do this.
The African Development Bank estimates that in the first phase of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, gains of about $2.8 billion will be recorded in real income, and intra-African trade is estimated to grow by 50%.
These gains actually multiply as the ambitions of the scenario move. So deeper integration will yield higher gains. What is important to keep in mind here is that while there is variation in terms of gains across countries and regions, all African countries are better off with more integration than without.
While we are bullish about the impact of regional integration, let's also be wary of the risks. And also realize that we should still manage our affairs as individual countries properly. Some of us are failing to service our debts on time, and some of the countries are accumulating high debt levels. They are entering a dangerous zone of debt sustainability or unsustainability of their debts. And this can be a drag on basically contributing to regional prosperity and regional integration. So managing your domestic affairs is still critical while participating in the regional objectives as a country.
Beyond the panel discussions, a key highlight of this year's event was the signing of 2 agreements in partnership with the African Development Bank to fund 2 initiatives. The State Secretariat for Economic Affairs of the Government of the Swiss Confederation signed the Entrepreneurship Lab for Innovative Young Entrepreneurs and the Urban and Municipal Development Fund for Africa. Switzerland joined the African Development Fund 47 years ago in 1972 and has been a full member of the African Development Bank since 1982. The State Secretariat for Economic Affairs of the Swiss Confederation contributed 3 million Swiss francs to the Entrepreneurship Lab, which is a component of the bank's Boost Africa strategy. This provides innovative young entrepreneurs with financing, technical assistance, and broader ecosystem support. 5 countries have been identified to pilot the e-lab, and they are Côte d'Ivoire, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa.
Project. It's an innovative project which is pushing the envelope in the space of fostering and supporting entrepreneurship in Africa. Young people to get them started in the business. So this is something we want to foster and push forward. And this is the moment where we came together. We tried to put our talents and the respective competencies of the African Development Bank versus also SECO, the State Secretariat. We put that together to push this envelope forward because it is crucially important that jobs are being created, innovation is coming and going into the private sector. And I think this, this project is one of the tools in the space where you have many actors to try to foster that, a niche where we try to push the envelope a little bit forward.
The Swiss government also contributed 200 million Swiss francs to the Urban and Municipal Development Fund for Africa, which helps African cities plan and manage urban growth and climate-resilient development by improving governance and basic services.
Urbanization is happening, if we like it or not. I think it's important to try to manage that in the best way possible. Now, this project is also an innovative project where we collaborate with the bank and the different teams within the bank, because it's a cross-cutting issue. Urbanization is a small space where all the issues come together. It's hard infrastructure, it's the soft part, it's the management part. And this innovative project, we will start step by step, try to pull in the experiences that we have been making globally, also with other partners in other regions, and try to collaborate with the bank to make a contribution to make the development of the urban space in a rational fashion, an efficient and effective fashion.
India is another country that has a long cooperation history with the AfDB. The Indian Exim Bank is collaborating with the bank, the State Bank of India, and the Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services Limited on the Kukuza Project Development Company. Since 2017, the facility has made progress in developing a pipeline of bankable infrastructure projects in Africa. And at this year's annual meetings, India-Africa Day focused on strategies to integrate African value chains with global value chains.
I would like to highlight a few strategies for the production and trade integration in Africa. One is the regional value chain development agenda. We need to develop regional value chains through intra-regional investments to overcome the infrastructural deficiencies. The firms in the regional value chains can eventually integrate it into the global value chains.
A critical highlight of the annual meetings was a presentation of the bank's financial results. The African Development Bank earned $214 million in income last year, which brings total generated income to $2.5 billion since 2010.
What is important to know is that while a portion of that earnings are kept in order to reinforce our reserves, 95% of the remaining amount has been distributed to key continent-wide initiatives to the benefit of lower-income countries on the continent.
The dividends of an institution like the African Development Bank is the impact, it's the changes it makes on the lives of the people. At the end of the day, the African Development Bank isn't about making money, and it's not paying dividends to its shareholders. The African Development Bank, when it was founded by its founding fathers in 1964, just after independence, was established with the purpose of making a real difference to people's lives. So what does that mean in practice? Well, the way that we like to see things at the African Development Bank is in terms of 5 key objectives in the way that we make that kind of difference.
Regional integration is a fourth of the bank's strategic high-five agenda to rapidly advance Africa's economic transformation. The other 4 are Light Up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa.
The future of Africa is bright. Africa will become more competitive. Africa will industrialize better. Africa will be able to create a massive amount of jobs. Africa will be able also to grow with what I call dignity, because you cannot have development unless you have dignity. And of course, there's no dignity in being poor. What we have to do is to make sure the force of cooperation, it's very, very important, so that even the smallest countries, the weakest countries, will find themselves richer and more prosperous in the power of regional integration.
We'll take a break now, and when we return, we'll bring you more highlights from the 2019 annual meetings of the African Development Bank. Join us again. Welcome back to the 54th annual meetings of the Africa Development Bank, holding here in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. We now continue with more highlights from the event. Feed Africa is one of the pillars of the bank's strategic high-five agenda and was also discussed extensively at the 54th annual meetings.
The Feed Africa initiative is one of the high-fives of the African Development Bank. The president, when he came in 2015, brought on a very ambitious program to transform agriculture on the continent.
One area that I know you're passionate about, and that's agriculture,
Absolutely.
food security, feeding, ensuring that Africa can actually feed itself. And that's obviously going to be one of the talking points at this year's discussions. But tying that into regional integration, ensuring that our farmers can now become part of global value chains, where are we in that regard?
You know, for example, let me just give you a quick one. If you take a look at chocolates, I'm sure you like chocolates. You know, I like chocolates as well. Yes. You know, but you know, Africa produces 75% of all the cocoa beans for making those chocolates. But we only get 2% of a $120 billion market for chocolates. Now, what's the brain surgery making chocolates? None. And so, you know, we've started as a bank. We've invested right now almost $660 million in Ghana. You know, helping them with their cocoa so that they can actually store their cocoa, they can process their cocoa and add value to it. We did massive investment in Cote d'Ivoire as well into processing of cocoa so they can make their own chocolates. And what's, as I said, you know, that's a big area. The other thing that we are doing is we are investing in commodity exchanges, because at the end of the day, the ability to trade commodities across regions is also important. As we invest as well in ICT infrastructure, you know, just the access to internet, it's so critical in today's trade for agricultural commodities.
Furthermore, during the 4-day gathering, the African Development Bank Group partnered with the Korean government on how they are using technology to boost agricultural productivity on the continent.
One of the flagship programs within the Feed Africa initiative is the Technologies for African Agriculture Transformation Program, TAT. Now, what the bank wants to do is ensure that it can leverage existing technologies, proven existing technologies, into all countries across the continent to ensure that we drive a private sector demand for agriculture lending, agriculture borrowing, agriculture transformation across the continent.
Last year in my country, in Busan, was held the AfDB annual meeting. So after the result, the Busan Metro City had decided to help the African continent for drone system.
It's not tools that will be used for agriculture, but it will be tools that will collect data.
Okay.
And the modern agriculture now is driven by data. So we'll have a lot of data, big data that will be analyzed and be used. And our expectation is to double the production in this region as a pilot. And we will duplicate the experience in other regions and in other countries of Africa. But the use of this data, they will allow not only to improve productivity, but also to optimize the use of fertilizer, disease, etc. There is a lot of things, even water, because now using drones, we can measure vegetation index, what we call vegetation index. Using this one, it gives us idea if there is need for water, if there is need for fertilization, and we give this information to farmers that will orient their actions to right place, right plant, right trees, etc.
The African Development Bank says Africa spends $47 billion importing food, and the bank projects that the figure could rise to $110 billion by the year 2025. On this panel, experts explored ways to integrate African farmers into regional and global value chains.
Today, we're seeing about $50 billion, almost $50 billion in net imports of food into Africa every year. And this is just increasing and increasing. It's already increased like 35% over the last few years. And this is because of, you know, things like rising urbanization, rising middle class, representing a great opportunity, but also a challenge. And if you look at the GDP numbers, for example, we see that, and also employment, we see that, say, about 70% in many countries of Africa, 70% of the population is working in the agriculture sector, and yet it only contributes about 25% to GDP.
If we want to make real progress for African farmers, for Africa, for African countries, we have to address the issues. It's a multi-pronged approach from different areas on different levels. Only then, I think there is a possibility to increase the productivity, to develop the entrepreneurship spirit that is required at the producer side, and to make them competitive.
Now, the heart of our discussion today has been basically transforming agriculture on the continent, taking it away from what it used to be or to be known for, just for rural farmers, subsistence farmers, but turning it into a business, focusing more on agribusiness. Established here, those African farmers need to be integrated into regional and global markets. That is for certain. Yes, it's a complicated process, it's complex, but technology is helping, to make things a little easier at least.
We all agree that agriculture as a business is the way to go. Agriculture as a business does not, however, mean large-scale, intensive, monoculture-based, high external input dependent, chemically dependent.
Africa is trading much less among itself than any other region in the world and trading much more with other regions. That's kind of crazy when you're trying to build a food system. And farmers are really at the heart of this, there's no doubt. And often they're smallholder farmers. So in everything that we're doing, we're ensuring that we're improving the capacity of companies to be off-takers, to buy from farmers so that they have a more steady income. And to the extent that you have a larger market, which is something that will be ushered in by greater regional integration, if we have the regional free trade agreement, which does seem to be moving forward, this just increases the possibility that much more. But I would like to say, at the bank, we look at agriculture very much as a business and not as a way of life.
The importance of infrastructure in achieving regional integration was also emphasized as the African Development Bank puts the continent's infrastructure needs at between $130 to $170 billion a year.
No regional integration without regional connectivity, meaning transport, ICT, also power interconnection. So it's really important to look at the two together.
We focus on infrastructure because you can talk about integration. The first order of business is that you must be able to link economy. You must be able to link producing area to consumption area. That requires investment in infrastructure to connect this connectivity of market.
The African Development Bank's 54th annual meetings wasn't all about work. Top banks, development finance institutions, and other high achievers across the continent were also celebrated. Equatorial Guinea also showcased its hospitality with a vibrant and colorful cultural night that was filled with good music, good food, networking, and celebration of the Central African country. This year's annual meetings were a packed couple of days filled with presentations, panel discussions and deals, but the message, importance, and call for deeper regional integration was at the center of every meeting.
If you look at each one of you on your table, and each one of you actually looks weak as a person, as an individual. But if I ask you to put your hands together and pull, then you really realize how strong you are. And so that's the power of regional integration as far as economies are concerned.
Be brave, as our dear Nelson Mandela said. It is always impossible until it is done. And I wish to say that all physical impossibility we're able to reach.
As the curtain draws on the bank's annual meetings in Equatorial Guinea, the light shines on Abidjan, the capital city of Côte d'Ivoire, which will be the host country for the 55th annual meetings next year.
We do believe, as a bank, that the Africa we will see 10, 15 years from now will be drastically different from the Africa that we see today. This is not a pipe dream. This, indeed, is a reality.
And that's a wrap on the highlights of the 54th annual meetings of the African Development Bank here in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. I'm Esther Awuni. Bye for now.